In 1995, the Philippine Navy was little more than a coastal patrol force. Its ships were aging, its funding was thin, and its sailors had little real deterrent against growing regional threats. Back then, the Navy was often overlooked, struggling to protect the very waters it was sworn to defend. But fast forward to 2025, and the story is completely different. That same Navy now ranks 41st of 145 militaries on the Global Firepower Index, its strongest standing in modern history. For the sailors who once risked their lives on outdated vessels, this transformation is more than just added power. It feels like long overdue redemption. So how did the Philippines climb from years of neglect to become one of Southeast Asia's fastest rising sea powers? Picture the BRP Jose Rizal launching a Mistral missile, a Cerro gunboat skimming the waves, and Marines deploying BrahMos supersonic missiles to guard the South China Sea. If you are Filipino, this surge means your waters and your future are safer than ever before. In the next few minutes, we'll trace the Navy's journey from weakness to strength and uncover the hidden secret behind its 2025 rise. This is the story of how the Philippine Navy became stronger than ever in 2025 and why the world is finally paying attention. In 1995, the Philippine government passed the AFP Modernization Act. On paper, it promised a bold new era for the Navy. Billions in funding were pledged for new ships, modern weapons, and better training. But the truth was very different. The money never truly arrived. What was meant to be the start of transformation became years of stagnation. By the late 1990s, most of the Philippine Navy's fleet still came from World War II. Rusting frigates, creaking patrol boats, and outdated destroyer escorts formed the backbone of its forces. Some ships were older than the sailors who crewed them, and yet, those sailors had to patrol a vast archipelago, over 7,600 islands, armed with little more than hope. They braved storms and territorial disputes with vessels that belonged in museums. Each mission was a reminder of how far behind the Navy had fallen. Morale suffered, but still, the sailors pressed on, because protecting their seas was a matter of duty. The modernization plan had stalled. Corruption, bureaucracy, and neglect left the Navy dangerously exposed. While neighbors like Malaysia and Singapore steadily modernized, the Philippines was forced to make do with floating relics. It was a quiet humiliation, a nation with vast maritime territory, but no real maritime strength. And yet, in those dark years, the seeds of resilience were being planted. The sailors who endured this era became the backbone of the Navy's eventual rise. The struggle of the 1990s wasn't just weakness. It was the fire that shaped a future comeback. So when did the first real reforms finally begin to take shape? By 2012, the Philippines could no longer ignore the growing threats in the South China Sea. The old 1995 modernization law had failed, and the Navy was still patrolling with floating relics. So the government launched a bold overhaul. The AFP modernization program was reborn as Re-Horizon. For the first time in decades, real budgets began to grow. The priorities shifted. No longer just about Coast Guard-style patrols, the Navy began thinking in terms of credible defense. The Philippines envisioned ships not for show, but for modern warfare. It meant surface combatants with advanced radars, missile-armed frigates that could stand guard in contested waters, and logistics ships to project strength across the vast Philippine archipelago. For ordinary citizens, these changes sounded almost unreal. For sailors who had served on rusting hulls, it was like a dream of long-awaited respect. For the first time, the Philippines was planning a navy that could fight, not just float. But this was still only a blueprint. Paper plans, promises, and speeches could not defend sovereignty. Without execution, the reforms would fade into yet another cycle of broken dreams. The world watched closely. Would the Philippines actually deliver steel in the water? Would the sailors finally have the ships they had been promised for decades? The tension built as the Navy stood at a historic crossroads. From relics to reality, the leap was close, but not yet taken. So when did the Navy finally put true modern warships to sea? The true shift began in the late 2010s, when the first Jose Rizal-class frigates arrived from South Korea. These weren't just ships, they were symbols of a new era. For decades, the Philippine Navy had sailed on rusting hulks from World War II. Now they finally stood beside modern regional fleets as equals. The Jose Rizal class introduced real firepower, For the first time, Philippine ships carried guided missiles. They came equipped with advanced sensors, capable of tracking threats from air and sea. Each frigate could even deploy its own helicopter, extending its reach beyond the horizon. For Filipino sailors, it was a moment of quiet vindication. No longer would they patrol the South China Sea as underdogs and obsolete vessels. Now they could sail with genuine confidence. When they stood on the decks of Jose Rizal or Antonio Luna, they knew they finally matched their regional peers, and the impact was profound. For the first time, Manila could project force beyond its immediate coast. No longer tied to harbor defenses, the Navy could now operate across the Philippine archipelago and into contested waters. These frigates weren't the largest ships in Asia, but for the Philippines, they represented a long-awaited rebirth. The old Navy of relics had given way to a fleet with modern teeth. And while 2 frigates alone could not change the balance of power, they laid the foundation, a foundation that would explode into something far greater by 2025. So how did the Navy build on this beginning and transform it into true power? By 2025, the Philippine Navy no longer looked like the neglected force of the past. Its fleet now sailed with guided missile frigates, upgraded Del Pilar patrol ships, and a swarm of Acero-class fast attack craft. The once defenseless archipelago finally had a fleet with teeth. The turning point came with the BRP Jose Rizal. In front of allies and observers, it carried out the Navy's first ever Mistral missile launch. A missile streaked from its deck, proving the Navy could now defend its skies with lethal precision. Below the waves, the Rizal was equally deadly. It carried Blue Shark torpedoes and Mark 46 torpedoes, giving the fleet true anti-submarine warfare for the first time. For sailors who once patrolled with nothing but deck guns, this was a moment of powerful redemption. They could now fight above the water, below it, and beyond the horizon. But the transformation didn't stop at sea. On land, the Philippine Marines unveiled their game-changing weapon, the BrahMos supersonic missile. Deployed along the coast, the BrahMos could deny enemy fleets access to the South China Sea. In minutes, a hostile ship could be erased from hundreds of kilometers away. This was the true symbol of deterrence. From frigates to fast attack craft, from Mistral missiles to BrahMos, the Navy had reshaped itself into a credible sea power. The world was beginning to notice. But weapons are nothing without the men and women who wield them. For decades, the Philippines sat far down the list, seen as weak and underprepared. Its Navy was dismissed as a symbolic fleet, not a serious deterrent. But in 2025, something historic finally happened. The Philippines climbed to 41st place overall, its strongest position ever recorded. This wasn't just a number, it was validation. For the first time, the Philippine Navy was seen as a credible maritime force. Its modern frigates, fast attack gunboats, and missile systems now counted in the balance of power. The Mistral air defense launch, the Blue Shark torpedoes, and the Marines' BrahMos supersonic missiles showed the world the fleet had real teeth. And it wasn't only hardware. Through Balikatan 2025, Filipino sailors proved they could fight shoulder to shoulder with allies like the United States, Japan, and Australia. Integration with advanced allied systems gave Manila more credibility than any single ship. For Filipinos, this was more than pride. It was redemption. The days of being underestimated were ending. But this achievement also came with new stakes. Climbing the rankings meant greater expectations and greater attention from rivals. The world was now watching the Philippines as one of Southeast Asia's fastest rising sea powers. And that leads to the next big question. What comes next for this rising fleet? The Philippine Navy's transformation doesn't end with today's fleet. By 2025, new contracts had already been signed. 6 Hyundai Heavy Industries offshore patrol vessels, OPVs, are now under construction. And alongside them, 2 advanced corvettes designed by HHI are on the way. These are not symbolic additions. They will expand the Navy's reach far beyond coastal patrols. For decades, Filipino sailors were confined to guarding narrow straits and shallow waters. Now, with OPVs and corvettes, they will soon patrol the open seas. Each vessel comes equipped with modern radar, surface-to-air missiles, and advanced combat systems. The message is unmistakable. The Philippine fleet is preparing for blue water operations. A navy once trapped near its coastline will soon stretch its power into the Pacific and the South China Sea. For sailors who once relied on relics, this is nothing short of a rebirth. But even this isn't the full picture, because Manila is thinking beyond surface ships. The government has openly discussed acquiring the Navy's most ambitious asset yet: submarines, silent hunters that would give the Philippines deterrence below the waves. For decades, submarines seemed like a distant dream. But now, with alliances, training, and contracts already shaping the fleet, the question feels closer than ever. So the next chapter asks, what about the long-discussed Philippine submarines? By 2025, Manila made its boldest naval decision yet, moving to acquire its first submarines. For decades, the idea of a Philippine undersea fleet had been little more than a distant dream. But now, serious bids were on the table. European shipbuilders stepped forward, offering advanced submarine designs. At the same time, India promised to support the Philippines with vital undersea infrastructure, training, basing, and maintenance. It meant Manila wasn't just buying submarines, it was building an entire ecosystem to sustain them. And the plans didn't end there. In Tokyo, policymakers began weighing a new possibility: transferring surplus destroyer escorts to Manila. Imagine the impact. Filipino crews sailing their first submarines, while Japanese-built warships patrol beside them. For a fleet that once relied on World War II hand-me-downs, this was a vision of true modernity. It marked a historic transformation, from a shallow water patrol force into a three-dimensional navy. Surface ships guarding the seas, submarines prowling beneath the waves, and missiles on land covering the skies and coasts. Together, they formed the outline of a genuine deterrent, a force designed to protect Philippine waters against any threat. For allies, it was proof the Philippines was stepping into a bigger role in the Indo-Pacific balance. For rivals, it was a warning that Manila was no longer a passive player. The Navy of 2025 had grown teeth, confidence, and support. But this raises the final question. What is the true secret behind why the Philippine Navy is stronger than ever in 2025? The Philippine Navy in 2025 is stronger than ever, not by chance, but because three powerful forces have converged. The first force is modern hardware. From Jose Rizal-class frigates to Acero gunboats, from Mistral missiles to marine-deployed BrahMos, the Navy now fields weapons built for real deterrence. The second force is allied integration. Through Balikatan 2025 and drills with US, Japan, and Australia, Filipino sailors proved they can operate shoulder to shoulder with the world's most advanced fleets. The third force is rising global recognition. In the Global Firepower Index, the Philippines climbed to 41st place, no longer dismissed as symbolic, but acknowledged as a credible sea power. This is the twist in perspective. From neglected coastal patrols in 1995 to credible sea denial in 2025, the Navy has redefined its identity. The moral is clear. True power is not built through shortcuts. It is forged through decades of persistence, sacrifice, and steady reform. For Filipino sailors, the transformation is deeply personal. It proves their long years of service on rusting ships were not in vain. Their sacrifice laid the foundation for the Navy's modern rise. Once weak, the Philippines is now ranked among the strongest in the region. But this is not the end. It is only the beginning. The question now lingers, can the Philippines climb even higher in the 2030s, when its first submarines finally slip beneath the waves? From patrol to power, the Philippine Navy has rewritten its destiny. What was once a scattered fleet of rusting relics is now a modern maritime force. In 2025, the Navy is no longer just surviving. It is actively competing. With guided missile frigates, fast attack craft, and allied-backed training that prove it belongs on the regional stage. For Filipino sailors, this transformation is a long-awaited vindication. Their sacrifices on outdated ships have built a Navy that finally commands respect. And for the world, it is a reminder that even small nations can rise through persistence and partnership. This is not the end of the Philippine Navy's story, only the beginning. Make sure you subscribe for more deep dives into the world's rising militaries. Now we turn the question to you. Do you think the Philippine Navy will break into the top 30 by the 2030s? Share your thoughts in the comments below.